Welcome back to Animal Crossing New Horizons. I'm Dear Darling, as you see what's going on our lovely island of Fawnhallow today in a really late at night episode of Animal Crossing. It's actually kind of similar that I kind of forgot that I haven't recorded today, and then I put it off for a little bit, and then I was like, oh, well, look at the time, it's 1 a.m. So, that's been later recordings, but here we are. Yeah. How's it going? Busy is what I say. When do things ever stop being busy? Apparently never. But good evening, everyone. I'm here with a late night broadcast. I hope I can make it through this. But right now in Fawnhallow, it's 12:57 on what should be Friday, July 12th, 2025. But we've skipped ahead to Saturday. This might actually be a very short difference between when I record, because I'm probably going to record quite early tomorrow. It's either I'm going to record super early or I'm going to record very late. I don't know. I've been on a spree of recording very, very late, haven't I, recently? Yeah, there's not much of a reason. I'm sorry if you can hear my fan, by the way, blowing. It's actually quite hot right now. So, despite in fact, it's quite late. I've got the fan blowing on low, just sort of directly at me at the moment, which I've not had before. I don't usually. Normally when it's like this, I would just sort of open the window because at night time it's cold enough, but here for now this time I'm using the fan. The fan thing always reminds me of a video I saw once about, sorry, I'm readjusting my sitting position, how it's actually better to cool yourself down by pointing a fan out the window instead of actually at yourself or something. Or cool the ambient temperature in a room down, because that starts getting ventilation to go out the window. I never really thought about it, but I assume that must only apply if the outside is actually cooler than the inside, which it's not always necessarily true, but so be it. But yeah, what are we gonna chat about today? I'm not really sure. That's a really good question. I'm just sort of trying to think of something. You know what? I did read today. Every once in a while, you get a little bit of a flashback to something. At least I do. That you ingested is such a weird way to put it, but a piece of media that you consumed, and then sometimes you go check it out every now and again. Today's one was something which I think has been going on for maybe a decade or something. But it's an online webcomic, which I started following back in my Homestuck days, called the prequel comic, or the Adventures of Katia Manigan. Which is basically just like a Skyrim, choose your own adventure kind of sort of thing. I don't know how else to really describe it, to be honest, but it's it's that sort of thing where readers can submit sort of commands. If you've seen Homestuck, you know what that is sort of is. So someone will draw a webcomic and then they leave it up to viewers to basically submit requests and commands of things to do, and then the character would do it. Kind of like a group choose your own adventure. Which is not really a thing I think which exists anymore, or if it does, I don't know where they are, but they're pretty cool. Homestuck is definitely, I think, the most notable one, despite the fact it stopped being that, I think, probably around Act 5 or so, but this one still is, as far as I can tell. Obviously, I think if you do these sort of things and you have enough of a following, you can pick and choose exactly which responses that you want to be the commands you do and just ignore the others, but yeah, I've always found them a very sort of cool and interactive medium, Anyway, this one follows the adventures of Katia Manigan. I think I like it mainly because it feels like it encapsulates a very sort of a sense of humour, which I think sort of resonates with me, where I don't know how to describe it except for I feel like the best way to put it is the comic likes to do these sort of gags, I suppose, or things which don't really make sense, or whatever, and then a few panels later it will explain why that gag make sense of a world. Like, but the one I always think about is, I'm not going to give you context for it, but there was basically, you know, like, they did a tumbleweed going across the screen, which doesn't really make sense because they were like in the middle of in like a basement in a dungeon, and then one of the characters later on goes something like, oh, you know, blah 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 blah. Oh, and the tumbleweed spider. Sorry, but if it's creeping you out or something, it just likes to stand there and listen when conversation happens. It's small things like that which I don't know resonate, I think, with my sort of sense of humor. It's sort of like non sequitur, but then grounding a non sequitur in logical reality, which somehow makes it even funnier from my perspective. It's sort of like reverse lampshading, because isn't that lampshading is where you sort of just like you acknowledge the absurdity of the situation, and then you go like, that's strange, and then move on. But this is like, you're like, okay, you know, that's strange, and this is why exactly it makes sense, and then you carry on. That's probably how I describe it. But yeah, if anything, you know, would I recommend you give it a read? Why not? I think one of the coolest things about it is they have like a lot of sort of flash interactive panels or something. Like one of them was a whole sort of like you explore the town, essentially as things went on, stuff like that. It's all honestly kind of cool, but it's extremely slow to update, which, you know, is fair enough. So it's not something where it's like I don't even know how the story's going to end, but I don't think it's going to end within the next decade, to be honest. But I have a lot of fun with it. You know, and I have my criticisms of it, I think, from time to time. You know, especially in the earlier point of the story, it felt like it was basically, I think in some ways it was a bit hard to get into because a lot of the story was sort of like, oh, building up, you know, things feel like it's finally on the up and up for a protagonist, and then suddenly everything comes crashing down. And the first time it happens, you're like, sort of fair enough, and then it happens again and again and again. It's like, come on, like, give the girl something. And I think now it actually is. So, you know, there we go. But yeah, it's not something which updates very often. So like the last time I checked it out, it feels like it's been a year ago or something. Probably not that long, but and it's had 2 new sort of updates since then. So that's sort of that, and like it's fun to sort of like go back to these sort of things. Like what's this medium called? Homestuck, like webcomic, internet fiction series, true. Webcomic, like interactive webcomic. How do you talk about it? Interactive webcomic. Set story and swipe reader speculation periodically. Yeah, okay, interactive webcomic. I mean, like, Homestuck by far and away is the most popular one, I think. And honestly, it's still crazy, kind of, that, like, at some point I should definitely do a Homestuck Animal Crossing video. Because it really is, like, I think it was one of the most formative, maybe not formative, but, like, formative for me pieces of media that I read. Like, I started reading it, I don't remember exactly. I think when I was a young teen or something. And I don't know. I'm not going to dive into it. I don't know what controversies and stuff like everything's been caught up with. That's probably for other people to talk about. But talking about the actual media property itself, disconnecting media from media author, I really enjoyed it. Mainly because of its world building and that sort of thing. And the thought experiments. It's basically like an isekai, I suppose. You know, it reads to me as young adult fiction. But if anything, I'm a little bit sad that I missed out on the interactive fiction part of it, like a part where people could submit in user commands. Not that I probably ever would. I'm very much more of a lurker than someone who actually interacts with properties and things like that, but who knows, in another life. But yeah, and at some point I should speak about it, because honestly I kind of love its concept. Also the sort of idea of its world. Mainly Spurb as a concept is a very, very cool thing. Maybe because it tickles the sort of like classification part of my brain, you know, the categorization, that's a word, that humans so love to put themselves into, because that's kind of basically what it is. But no, I basically love the short summary of the thing I love most about it is the fact that the actual world, the Spurb, is essentially built to be like, this is a way to test these characters and allow them to grow as people, and it's up to them with how they accept or don't accept that, essentially. Like, the roles they're given in the game, the planets they're given are all supposedly meant to test them, meant to make them grow as a person. And they can either, like, submit to their vices, or they can actually improve as a person. I'm just like, I love that for that, you know? A literal world, which is the sort of story arc motivator, in a way. Character arc motivator, shall we say. Is it perfect? No, I think it very much sort of gets out of hand of, like, scope creep into the later acts, and I think its ending is not so satisfying in a way, mainly because of the undoing of some character arcs here and there, but otherwise, you know, I think the space it leaves for someone's own fiction to be created is really the most exciting part of it, really. But your mileage may vary, I would say. But yeah, it's nice to check in with something which you haven't checked in for a super long time and be like, oh yeah, you know, that's still going on. That's pretty cool. I like that. But yeah, apart from that, I mean, what else to say about, well, anything really. Apart from that, it's sort of vibing. I'm glad it's a weekend. It's going to be a bit busy tomorrow for good, nice reasons. Meeting up with some friends. We're going to try some more weird ice cream flavours, hopefully. I don't really know what to expect, so I suppose that will be part of a surprise itself, and it'll make it very entertaining, methinks. Animal Crossing video. But what else can we chat about real quick, like? I'm trying to think of, like, other things which I've, like, not seen for ages and then check back in every once in a while, just to sort of see what's going on. I don't really know, to be honest. It's a bit hard to think of something off the top of your head, mind you, but that's kind of a point. Like, if you don't think about it for ages and you check back in, and then you sort of get surprised by, like, oh, look how much things have progressed, you know. I want to, like, I say I do this all the time. I often go to the subreddits of these, like, media properties I used to engage with. Like, what's r/Homestuck doing right now? I don't know, because they used to, like, continue on the Homestuck stories, as I understand it. There was, like, things which followed on. There was, like, epilogues and stuff, and Homestuck Squared, Homestuck 2, but then it got shut down, maybe? Honestly, I don't know what happened to it, so maybe not the point for me to ask or say. But yeah. What sort of like it's sort of like building up all your updates at once, you know. Or something which updates infrequently, and then just sort of cashing in, being like, "Oh, what's going on? What's happened with it?" What other sort of like webcomics? I mean, now we've got webtoons, so I think it's even easier to sort of track things. Like, is everything's fine? How's that going? I mean, the update should be tomorrow, not today, so unsurprisingly, it's probably not there. There are a lot of what look to be romance webtoons on Webtoon, huh? Half of these look like romances. Like, look, beloved and competent stepmom, savage proposal, Duchess in ruins. Okay, this one actually, reborn young lord is an assassin. But this looks like an isekai. So many of these are romance. Wild. But it's nice to basically sort of check in with these things every now and then, just sort of see what's going on, right? There's, I'm not gonna say nostalgic, I suppose, but there's a certain sense of progression you feel like, I think, when you check with these in, like, in different parts of your life when you check it in. There's not many things, you know, which have such consistency, I think, for your life. So being able to, I think, have your own consistency with them, it's a nice sort of, you know, way to timestamp who you are and how you've changed. I think it's even harder to find something which at least is still progressing on time, because I think a lot of things which I engaged with when I was younger certainly like either like aren't a thing anymore or something else. So, you know, checking back in is sort of just like more like checking in with a frozen archive of time rather than checking in with something still actively progressing but I just don't follow anymore. And is that a sad thing? Maybe. But in some ways I think it's like a cool thing as well. Like, I mean, Homestuck was definitely one of them. And like, I'm pretty sure I started reading it when I was 12, I think. Don't quote me on that, because I'm not 100% sure. But then, like, thinking back to, like, each of the story beats at different parts of my life when I watched them is always interesting as well. My Little Pony's another one. But both of those have, like, finished now, so it's not, like, something I can use to sort of milestone my life anymore. I wonder what will be, like, a milestone thing. Maybe, like, League of Legends or something? But the thing is, I don't think I engage with League of Legends nearly that much anymore, which makes it a bit difficult to actually sort of do things. Like, I remember the first champions who were released, but now, like, everything is basically a blur since, I don't know. What's the oldest champion which still feels new-ish to me from, like, a different, like, I mean, I guess, like, we sort of form generations in my mind. Like, everything before Cassiopeia feels old to me because I wasn't there for their release. And then you get to a point like, I don't know, Fresh maybe? Where everything from like Cassiopeia to Fresh feels like the generation when I was like playing it most actively. And then everything from Fresh to like Orn? Maybe? Zoe? That sort of region feels like the next one of like, oh, that's when it was like sort of flourishing, and then for everything from Zoe to Cassante maybe feels like a sort of ambiguity where I was like I wasn't really playing much, and then like Cassante onwards I was like basically never playing. I don't know how many years ago that was necessarily, and the release of new champions definitely slowed down a lot, but to a certain degree I can still remember a lot of the champions as they were released and sort of my thought processes on when they were being released. And I really think it's a good thing that we slowed down, because a lot of them in the early days I remember blurring together, at least to me. Like I'm looking at like a list of champions now. Like I remember Riven was churned out so quickly compared to some of her previous ones, and wasn't she like insanely buggy on her release or something? That's what I remember. Yeah, I'm looking back at these and it's crazy. It's so weird to think about how different I think things are now compared to when I played. Well over a decade ago, 15 years ago. My word. But I don't know, having these sort of like timestamps of your lives are very nice in a way. So, if anything, to bring it back full circle, I'm kind of glad that prequel updates so slowly. I can vaguely remember when I started reading it, around Homestuck era, as it was like a recommended thing as well. And now as things get sort of like further and further on, you know, I'm reading now, probably over a decade later, and it's still like the different story beats mark out different milestones in my life in some sort of weird way, I suppose. Anyway, on that note, I'm going to round this episode off here. So if you haven't been watching, thank you very much. It's been Animal Crossing New Horizons. I've been Dear Darling. Likes, comments, subscription, shares, greatly appreciated. Social Discord down below. Hope to see each other again, but for now, it's our farewell. So until next time, bye-bye for now.